An increasing number of adults are generously spending money to collect toys. Why is this happening and how much money are they spending? The global economy is still cloudy in the second half of this year. What are the external factors threatening Korea's economy and measures to overcome such risks? We can clone precious and pricey wild ginseng in large scale, using a technology to culture ginseng roots. If so, are cloned wild ginseng as effective as the natural one? Hospitals begin to pay attention to improving convenience for patients as well as curing them. Let's meet the ICT services that reduce patients' waiting time. North Korea suffers from threats of floods each year. They are caused by deforestation in the country. How serious is the damage to its forests?
Hello, I'm Andrew Salmon and welcome to Bizline. Let's begin this week's show with a quote from the Bible. When I was a child, I spoke childish words, I thought childish thoughts, and I played childish games. But when I became a man, I put aside childish things. Well, no longer. There is a growing group of grown adults who remain obsessed with such childish things as Lego bricks, action figures, and remote-controlled cars. So many of these people are there, there's now a compound word to describe them. It's a combination of kid and adult, so they're called kidults. So, how big is the kidult market? And who are these people?
Grown-ups indulging in toys like kids. With an increase in the number of kidults, a newly coined word of kid and adult, related industries and markets are also rapidly growing. The Kid and Adult Fair 2014 has recently taken place in Seoul. From various characters, plastic models, figures, remote-control models, and paper crafts to art toys, the event has successfully showcased products that stimulate children's dreams and imaginations or evoke feelings of nostalgia for adults.
특히 피규어들이 너무 자세하게 디테일하게 만들어진 것 같아서 되게 놀랐습니다.
일단은 이제 자녀를 갖고 있는 분들이 많은 반응을 있을 거라고 생각을 했는데 그 20대 그리고 10대 말에 젊은 분들까지도 관심을 갖는 다양한 세대가 아우르는 또 관심 갖는 그런 전시회가 되었습니다.
This department store has decorated an entire floor with the theme of toys, recreating itself as the largest kidult store in the country. Sales are rapidly rising as its toys draw attention from adults as well as kids.
미니카 사려고 하거든요. 옛날 어렸을 때 그냥 이름도 모르는 친구들 보면서 그냥 너 대결할래? 막 이런 생각도 나고 되게 뭔가 어렸을 때 생각나서 그냥 마냥 계속 웃었던 것 같아요.
Here, sales of toys in August surged 71% from a year earlier. Lego, which has produced 700 billion bricks until now, is the world's most popular toy company. Every person on the earth owns nearly 100 Lego bricks on average. It is a typical kidult company, which has fans in both young and older generations. We can assume its huge popularity by the growth of its sales, which jumped about 15 times from 2004. Thanks to its continued growth each year, the kidult-related market in Korea is currently estimated at about $500 million to $700 million. So why are grown-ups enthusiastic about toys like this?
어른들의 취직 연령이 계속해서 뒤로 늦춰지면서 자신들의 어떤 억눌렀던 욕망들이 갑자기 폭발되는 구매로서 나타나는 그런 현상으로 볼 수 있고요. 또 자신이 성장할 때 한국 경제가 굉장히 호황이었는데 그런 어린 시절에 대한 회고나 해상들이 자신의 어떤 심리적인 만족감을 준다고 할 수 있겠습니다.
One of the characteristics of kidult products is that they are not cheap. Despite the high prices of plastic models, figures, and RC toys, grown-ups with more cash to spend are nonchalantly lavishing money on them.
초기 비용은 한 30만 원에서 35만 원 선으로 시작을 처음에는 했고요. 그러면서 이제 조금씩 늘려나가고 있는 겁니다. 아무래도 가족들하고 다 같이 할 수 있는 부분이니까 뭐 어디 뭐 휴가 가도 그 정도 선은 쓰는 비용이니까 그렇게 생각하고 하고 있습니다.
뭐 가격이 비싼 제품들 같은 경우는 뭐 200에서 300만 원 정도까지 가격을 호가할 정도로 굉장히 가격이 높은 가격대를 형성하는 제품들이 있고요. 특히나 자동차 같은 경우는 사람들이 남성들이 가장 로망으로 꿈을 꾸고 가격을 들이더라도 자기가 정말 원하는 차들을 갖고 싶어하는 그런 욕구들이 분명히 있으신데 그 가격대가 형성이 되더라도 그 차량을 그 축소된 차량들을 가질 수 있다는 어떻게 보면 그 하나의 만족감 때문에 그런 부분에 대해서도 서슴지 않고 구매를 하시는 것 같습니다.
As the kidult market grows, companies are also aggressively developing related products. Although they still lag behind companies from the US or Japan, Korean firms are also showing outstanding performances. Among them, Momod has commercialized the paper toy segment for the first time in Korea. It achieved success by creating robots and Disney or Marvel characters with paper.
일단 이 종이의 형태가 굉장히 만들기가 쉬워 보이지만 이게 그렇지가 않거든요. 그러니까 어린이들이 만들기에는 조금 어려운 난이도의 그런 제품이기 때문에 보통 어른들이 만들 때 1시간 정도를 투자해야지 만들 수가 있거든요. 그래서 거기서 나오는 보람이라든지 아니면 만들고 나서의 성취감을 사람들이 굉장히 느끼시는 것 같아요.
Starting the business with about $500, Momod has created a myth by achieving sales of about $2 million in just 3 years since its establishment, using just paper to stimulate grown-ups' childhood innocence.
예쁘고 이제 또 종이로 만들었는데도 생각보다 디테일해서 되게 좋은 것 같아요.
모모트의 지금 성장률을 보시면 작년부터 이제 50% 정도의 성장률을 보이고 있습니다. 그리고 현재 수출을 목적으로 하고 있기 때문에 필리핀이라든지 동남아 그리고 홍콩, 중국 등지에서 지금 저희가 수출을 계획 중에 있습니다.
Tamiya Korea has a huge fan base. The company creates realistic vehicle miniatures of famous cars with precision work to 0.1mm accuracy. Therefore, car fanatics who can't own the real cars but want the satisfaction of owning one enjoy buying these products.
약간 좀 동심으로 돌아가는 느낌도 나고 그리고 자동차 색깔도 여자들이 좋아할 만한 귀여운 제품들이 많은 것 같아요. 저 다 갖고 싶어요.
기존에 저희가 금형의 수출에 국한되어 있던 부분들이 이제는 시대와 문화가 변하면서 모바일 사업을 포함을 한 의류 혹은 서적 그리고 애칭 파트, 이제 프라모델에 들어가는 강화 파트들을 포함을 한 여러 가지 사업 영역을 저희가 수출을 통해 가지고 사업 영역을 넓히려고 노력을 하고 있습니다.
The domestic market still largely depends on imported toy brands. But as the kidult market grows further, Korean companies armed with unique concepts and creative ideas are also actively entering the market.
이런 키덜트 열풍은 한국에서만 불고 있는 바람은 아니고요. 우리 옆에 있는 일본에서도 불고 있고 중국에서도 불고 있고 뭐 미국이나 유럽에서도 사실 나타나고 있는 현상입니다. 그런 측면에서 본다면 그 원인을 조금 더 크게도 볼 수 있는데요. 전 세계적인 불황에 그에 따른 어떤 복고적인 코드에 대한 열망 그리고 그것의 어떤 하위 차원으로서 이 키덜트를 해석해 본다면 잠시 나타났다가 사라지는 일시적인 패드나 그런 트렌드가 아니고요.
지금 젊은 세대들뿐만 아니라 기성세대들도 이제 캐릭터들에 많은 관심을 갖고 있거든요. 그럼 그 캐릭터들이 형상화된다고 하면 피규어가 될 수도 있고 프라모델들이 될 수 있다고 생각합니다. 그리고 아까 말씀드렸듯이 전 세대를 아우를 수 있는 그런 취미 문화이기 때문에 앞으로의 시장 발전 가능성은 무궁무진하다고 생각합니다.
Childhood innocence and nostalgia for antiquity. Kidult marketing is opening the wallets of adults. Kidults, who rapidly emerged as the new marketing target for companies, are raising expectations of a boom in related to culture and industries at the same time.
Forecasting global economic movements in the second half of 2014 looks like a dodgy business given the uncertainty hovering over the G2 nations, China and the United States. Moreover, here at home, Korea faces a double whammy. The issue of external uncertainty and the internal factor, or the perennial internal factor, of feeble domestic demand. So what does the second half hold for the Korean economy? Well, we'll be asking our guests to make some of those dicey predictions. Is the president of the Korea Institute for International Economic Policy, Dr. Il-houng. Welcome to Bizline.
Thank you for having me here.
Okay, well, thank you. Now, I've just come back from vacation. Just looking at the big picture, Korea looks pretty healthy. We're seeing continual current account surpluses, continual trade surpluses, strong forex reserves. The market is comfortably over 2,000 points, and so on and so forth. And yet, we've recently seen the Bank of Korea has cut its growth forecast for the year from 4% to 3.8%. The Finance Ministry has cut its forecast from 3.9 to 3.7%. What's behind this pessimism?
I think Korea is at the moment facing two problems. One is structural, sort of medium long-term problem. The other one is cyclical issue. As you know, Korea used to be an export-led economy growth.
Sure.
And it still is to a large extent.
Absolutely.
The problem with that is that recently the contribution from exports to GDP growth has been waning. Even though the export to GDP itself has been steadily increasing, the problem there has been the decline in value added for each dollar exported. That's one. And two, somehow there seems to be less spillover from the positive income earned from exports
into the local economy. Sure. Okay.
So that's one. So there is a need to change the growth model from an export-led to more balanced, both export and domestic demand led growth. So that's the structural part. The cyclical part is, as most of the G20 countries or the most leading economies are facing at the moment, we seem to have a cyclical downturn. And it's fairly difficult to get out of this bottom. Korea was about to do so in 2013, and the first quarter of this year was relatively strong. And then the second quarter started again to dip instead of going further up, and that's why the two institutions that you mentioned started to reducing the growth forecast. It's coming essentially from weaker domestic demand than anticipated.
Okay, you mentioned just now Korea is very much a trade or export dependent economy. So let's just take a look at big picture issues for the main trade partners. Let's start with the big advanced markets. How do you see the US looking in the second half of 2014?
I think, as you know well, the first quarter was a bad start for the US. In the second quarter, it seems to have recovered. So on balance, brought slightly below what one would have anticipated at the beginning of the year. Second half, we expect the US economy to remain broadly as it has performed on average during the first half. So what we are looking at is broadly the same GDP growth level this year relative to last. So instead of having further recovery, we think that it will be a sort of a flat performance.
Moving across the Atlantic, EU.
EU last year almost minus 0.5. We think that EU now has bottomed out. I don't think that there is a genuine sort of fundamental improvement in the economic situations in the European countries. As you know, the financial fragmentation is still ongoing, deleveraging is taking place, and so on, and there's still debt problems. But it seems to have bottomed out, and indicators, high-frequency data seems to indicate the economy is now moving sideways or slightly up in some countries, particularly in the core European countries like Germany. So on balance, we think that Europe may be able to grow close to 1% this year. So it's a swing of 1.5%, which takes the average of the advanced economies up.
And Japan?
Japan, the initial positive feedback from Abenomics last year is starting to wane. Secondly, also we had some pickup in investment, as you know, in 2012, 13 in particular. That's also sort of waning. Not in the sense that there is less investment, but it's essentially once you have the growth impetus coming from higher investment, it stays the same, then the additional impetus coming from investment is now gone. So in that respect, I think Japan will probably grow between 1 and 1.5% this year.
That's a slowdown from last year?
Definitely a slowdown.
Let's move to the BRICS. Let's start with the first three, Brazil, Russia, India. How are they looking in your analysis?
Brazil. Brazil, I think, as you know, is facing some problems in the FX market initially, but it was suffering from large inflows, so high currency value. Now it's starting to adjust to a new steady state. So definitely growth will slow this year as it has to adjust in the financial market as well as in the FX market. Commodity prices have come down as also. So probably we're talking about 1% below last year.
Okay.
Russia, it's a big question mark.
A very big question mark given the political situation
right,
in Ukraine, right?
So I think at the beginning of the year, people were expecting Russia to grow around 1%, but now people are more leaning towards 0% growth this year.
Okay.
For many reasons.
Or recession?
Well, if it depends. As I said, it depends on how much this current political situation
impacts. Okay.
And continues.
Okay.
Sense, yes.
India?
India, I think, had implemented the right policies at the beginning of the year. It has actually did stabilize the economic situation. And then the new prime minister.
There's a lot of hope for the new prime minister in India. Yeah.
Right. I don't think necessarily the policies are new, but what he has that the former prime ministers didn't have is the political majority. That's very important for India to have in order to implement the necessary policies.
Yeah.
Right.
Fourth brick, of course, is China, which of course Korea is increasingly dependent upon. It's the largest trade partner. How do you see China right now? That there are fears now, of course, of a growth slowdown.
China it probably slowed down somewhat faster than the authorities anticipated, and that's why they came out with the sort of a mini stimulus package recently. Yep. I think they will continue to do so and make sure that GDP growth doesn't fall below, let's say, about 7%.
Yeah.
And as things look, looking at the high frequency data and so on, so they're probably going to end up between 7 and 7.5.
Okay, which looks reasonably solid from, I think, most perspectives. So, I mean, are the fears about a slowdown there justified? If this does slow down, not much of a slowdown, is that a blip or is that going to be a long-term trend?
It's the beginning of a long-term trend. As you know, they used to grow at two-digit level.
Yeah.
They now slow to around 7.5.
Are we seeing a maturity in the Chinese economy?
It's not maturity necessarily, but I think what happened was initially they were actually benefiting from various factors. One is globalization and the trade growth. Second was they had a lot of excess capacity, including resources that they can actually utilize. Yeah. And they came up very strongly pushing the global economy forward, particularly post the 2008 crisis. Heavy investment, and that actually kept growth for a while. Now they are facing some consequences of probably pushing it a little bit too fast.
Yeah.
So around 7%, I think, is for now the steady state sustainable growth. Maybe in a couple of years from now, growth rate most likely will have to fall down further. But I don't think that we will be seeing a hard landing in China.
Okay. All right. Now, let's go over to the US. There are fears, or there are concerns perhaps, of a rate hike by the US Federal Reserve Board. Do you think this is going to come, and how merited is it given the current state of the US economy?
I think they will still sort of raise the policy rates sometime during the first half of next year. For now, it's probably the middle of next year, but probably a bit earlier than the second half.
Okay.
The reason I think is because economic indicators seems to hint that things are turning for the better.
Yep.
For now, I say for now because the U.S. has a lot of problems over the medium long term.
Let's move on to the domestic economy. Of course, recently on August 14th, the Bank of Korea cut its key rate by 0.25 percentage points. The first time, I think, in 15 months. How do you assess the BOK's move? Was it time for a jump start?
I think it depends what factors you give more weight, obviously. For one, if you just take certain rules like Taylor rules or compare the past pattern of how Asian policy rates were tracking the US Fed fund rate, for example, then the rate cut was long overdue. On the other hand, looking forward, given the normalization process in the United States and the potential risks involved with this normalization process in many sense, you would like to have some room either to raise or to reduce it. And I think that's part of the reason why the central bank in Korea held its policy rate as it has
for so long. Yeah.
For so long, because they wanted to have room on both sides
maneuver,
in case
yeah.
there was a shock coming. For example, a financial shock, most likely they may have to raise interest rate. A real shock, they may have to reduce interest rate. So, but once they start reducing it now, I'm not sure whether they will have enough room
for maneuver
later.
Yeah.
Right. I think that was part of their concern.
Okay, understood. Now, let's talk about this absolutely perennial issue, something which I think has been around in the Korean economy since 2002, which is the very, very sluggish domestic demand indeed. Now, the government has come up with a range of measures. Most recently, it's going to encourage employers to raise wages. It's going to encourage companies to pay more dividends, which is something you don't often hear about in Korea. Firstly, do you think companies will accept these this guidance from government and take these incentives and do what the government wants? And secondly, do you think these incentives or these movements will be enough to kickstart domestic demand?
I don't think that one single measure will actually do the trick.
Yeah.
I think you need everything together, working together. Now, whether companies will do it or not, that depends on the degree, the scope of the incentive that they provide.
Yeah.
For now, it's not clear to what extent companies respond, and also know the scope of the incentives.
Incentives, right.
But companies are after profit, so they will do whatever is profitable for them.
Yeah.
And if they think it will benefit them, then they'll do it. But there is a difference between what companies will do and what the country will benefit from.
Right.
And it's not necessarily that more jobs that companies will offer will necessarily lead to faster economic growth, because what they can do is, in the short run, if they raise wages, for example, they can cut numbers of jobs. Or if they increase the employment, they can cut the wages. So what we need really is new jobs, better jobs, that actually is tied to new value added being created in the economy.
In the industry, sure.
And that's the challenge. And if you look at the 3-year plan, a third of the measures, whether you look at one or the other, are actually devoted to making sure that new jobs are being created to generate value added, so that the new virtuous cycle in the economy is restarted.
Okay, as you mentioned. Okay, let's go to a final sort of question. What do you think are the key metrics or the key indicators that Korea watchers should be watching in the second half of this year as signals and indicators for the growth rate? What are the big ones for you?
For me, I think at the moment, like India, for example, we need a strong political push for the reform that's on the table. And if we have that, I think we can step into the next model of economic growth.
But hold it, when you say the reforms on the table, you're talking about laws which are pending in the National Assembly and are going to face a big political fight?
That's the major part. Plus, we have also other implementing regulation that is being drafted at the moment. They also have to come out and they need to be implemented.
So you're saying that more so than something such as, say, the $1 exchange rate, you're much more concerned about the domestic political scene and actually getting reform pushed through?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, well, Dr. Lee, thank you very much indeed for being on Bizline. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Watching a musical or a play is more expensive than watching a movie? You can watch them at the cheapest prices using Time Ticket, an app for Android users. How is this possible? It is because they are plays or musicals close to their performance dates. Time Ticket offers performances that will be played today or tomorrow at more than a 60% discount. The app also recommends you discount tickets of performances that are not close to performance dates. Now, if you choose the right one, you can watch stage performances, generally considered to be expensive, at a price similar to a movie.
Cultivated ginseng, which is used in health foods and medicines, is one of Korea's most famous products. But the best kind of ginseng, and the most expensive, is the wild variety which grows in the mountains. And this gave a team of Korean researchers a rather clever idea. Why not use cloning technologies to produce wild ginseng in bulk?
Scientists have made headway in animal cloning ever since the famous sheep Dolly became the first successful cloned mammal in the late 1990s. The history of plant cloning goes back much further, even back to the ancient days. The technology has been put to everyday use today to sustain best quality in plant species. Cloning technology has been applied to a broad range of species of plants, from flowers and trees to ginseng. How far have we come in the technology of man-made vegetative propagation? At the Korea Forest Service, located in Suwon, Gyeonggi-do Province, a laboratory is entirely devoted to research and development of plant cloning technology using stem cells. The asexual characteristic of plants, which allows them to replicate themselves, actually makes the cloning process relatively easy. Techniques are widely applied among gardeners, farmers, and horticulturists.
식물 복제라고 하면은 이제 쉽게는 이제 원예나 화예 분야에서는 이제 꽃이 아름답거나 특히 또 어떤 잎이 좋다든가 이런 것들을 이제 그러니까 꽃꽂이 방법, 또는 삽목 방법, 또 접목 방법, 또는 조직배양 방법에 의해서 이렇게 쉽게 응용할 수가 있겠죠. 저희가 다루고 있는 그런 산림 분야, 임업 분야에서는 특히 열대지방에서는 이제 크론 임업이라고 해서 형질이 좋은 나무, 그러니까 생장이 빠르고 또한 통직하고 병해 중에도 강한 그런 나무를 선발할 수가 있거든요. 그런 것들을 이제 복제의 방법으로서 이용해서 산업화에 응용한다 그러면 보다 단기간 내에 좋은 목재를 생산할 수가 있기 때문에 식물 복제를 이용한 그런 기술은 다방면으로 매우 유용하다고 생각이 되어집니다.
Plant cloning is a reproduction process of cutting tissues or cells to grow them into a new plant with the same genetic makeup as the donor plant. Plants have common ability to replicate themselves through natural means. For example, when a potato sends out a runner, a new plant grows where the runner takes root.
식물 세포는 이제 동물 세포하고 다른 것이 이제 전형성능이라는 그런 특수한 성질이 있는데 이제 하나의 단세포로부터 기관이 형성되고 해서 이제 완전한 그런 개체로 만들어지는 어떤 능력을 전형성능으로 말씀을 드릴 수가 있는데 전형성능을 좀 더 세분해 보면 이제 기관 형성이라는 의미도 있고 또 배형성이라는 의미도 있거든요. 기관 형성이라는 것은 어떤 식물 조직으로부터 뭐 뿌리가 나온다든가 줄기가 나온다든가 잎이 나온다든가 이런 것들을 기관 형성이라고 그러고 배형성이라는 것은 그야말로 종자배처럼 식물 줄기나 잎이나 뿌리를 가지고 종자배 같은 똑같은 배를 만들어요. 그러니까 초대포배라고 그러는데 그런 것들을 만드는 방법이 식물 복제의 대표적인 예가 되고 있죠. 그래서 그런 방법을 이용해서 우리가 원하는 형질의 어떤 식물이나 나무를 대형으로 복제할 수가 있는 것입니다.
The cloning technology is useful when applied to rare plant species like decades-old mountain ginseng, famous for medicinal benefits that are hard to grow and unaffordable to most people. This bioengineering venture company in Korea has applied cloning technology to cultivate wild ginseng and successfully turn out commercialized products. A cultured ginseng root is cultivated with root samples from mountain ginseng. Only roots rich with saponin types effective in boosting the immune system are carefully selected and extracted and harvested for about 60 days in a large bioreactor tank that is supplied with sterilized nutrients and oxygen.
산삼 배양근의 경우에는 저희들이 산삼 조직에서 그러니까 줄기세포를 유대하는 데까지 최소한 한 2-3개월의 시간이 소요가 됩니다. 그리고 그 줄기세포로부터 또 산삼 부정근을 유도하는 데 2-3개월 소요가 되고요. 그래서 이 유도된 산삼 배양근을 저희들이 액체 배양을 하기까지 또 어느 정도 증식시키는 배양 기간이 필요합니다. 그리고 거기에 어느 정도 증식되면 이걸 저희들이 이제 대량으로 생산하는 그 라인까지 가기에는 또 얼마만큼의 시간이 걸리고요. 그래서 만약에 하나의 산삼으로부터 저희들이 탱크 배양할 수 있는 단계까지 가기 위해서는 최소한 1년 정도의 시간이 필요합니다.
The incubator or bioreactor is vital to provide the same environment in moist and temperature that grows wild ginseng and reproduce them in mass quantity. Sustaining and controlling pressure at a constant level is a crucial technology in mass production.
생물 반응기를 갖다가 이제 크게 만들면은 아주 많은 세포를 배양할 수 있는데 전 세계적으로 그걸 잘 못하는 이유 중에 하나가 탱크 속에서 세포가 가지는 수압입니다. 그러다 보니까 20톤 탱크 같으면은 거의 대부분 식물 세포는 상부에 있을 때는 관계없지만 하부로 왔을 때는 다 터져버립니다. 그래서 저희가 생각했는 거는 배양 탱크 속에다가 용액이 가득 차 있는 어떤 그 상태에서 공기를 주입하는데 들어가는 공기양은 많이 하고 나오는 공기양을 적게 해버리면은 그 배양 탱크 속에서 영양 용액 속에서 많은 양의 공기가 존재하게 됩니다. 그러면 그 많은 공기가 수압을 낮추게 되기 때문에 식물 세포는 클 수가 있는 겁니다.
Clone products through artificial reproduction is different from genetically modified organisms. It has the same genetic characteristics of the parent plant.
있으면 식물체의 세포나 조직을 빼서 그 자체가 완전한 식물체가 될 수 있도록 그러니까 그 세포가 줄기세포라고 인식할 수 있는 그런 환경 조건을 줘가지고 이 세포가 완전한 식물체가 되는 거기 때문에 여기는 외부에서 유전자가 전혀 들어가지 않죠. 그래서 우리가 이야기하는 식물 복제라 그런 게 사람들이 GMO와 관계 있다 생각하지만도 GMO와는 전혀 틀리는 겁니다.
How identical is the cultured root from the real ginseng rooted out from the mountains? Are there some differences in the ingredients and their health benefits?
실제 이제 저희가 천연 산삼을 가지고 산삼 배양근을 배양하는데 그 원래 원료삼으로 사용되는 천연 산삼을 분석을 먼저 합니다. 그 분석한 자료를 가지고 이제 산삼 배양근하고 비교를 하게 되는데요. 그 비교한 이 크로마토그램상의 그 그래프가 거의 일치되게 나옵니다. 그래서 실제 산삼과 산삼 배양근이 유전자 분석의 결과에도 마찬가지로 이제 이 결과에서도 거의 똑같게 나오는 거죠.
Clinical studies show cultured root contains the same saponin and other beneficial elements of 60 to 70-year-old ginseng that grew in the wild. How can a root incubated and cultivated in less than a year contain the same effect of multi-decades-old ginseng?
식물들은 어떤 게 있노 하면은 환경에 대해서 식물들은 정확하게 센싱을 해가지고 이 상태에서 내가 어떻게 하겠다는 그걸 갖다가 할 수 있는 능력을 가지고 있습니다. 저희가 배양하는 과정 중에서 거의 하루 이틀 간격으로 온도를 20도씨 쭉 올렸다가 2도씨로 떨어뜨려 버리면은 이 배양된 산삼을 어떻게 생각하나 하면 내가 1년이 되구나 하는 걸 갖다가 인식을 하게 됩니다. 한 60분에 70분을 갖다가 온도를 갖다가 올렸다 내렸다 했는 그 산삼을 갖다가 자연 상태에 있는 산삼하고 비교했을 때 거의 한 6, 70년 되는 산삼하고 성분이 같이 나온다 하는 걸 저희가 알게 됐죠.
The technology has allowed commercialization of more than 100-year-old ginseng in every 2 months. Reproduction through bioreactor technology can be applied to industrialize not only ginseng products, but also various herbal and medicinal plants.
산삼 배양근을 이용한 방법들이 이제 좋은 하나의 사례가 되겠고요. 또한 우리가 물론 동의보감을 통해서 이제 그 양이 효능이 밝혀져 있는 식물들이 많이 있거든요. 그런 식물들을 대상으로 특정한 어떤 그 기관이라고 할 수 있는데 뿌리는 뿌리, 잎은 잎, 줄기는 줄기 그런 부분들만 저희가 이제 배양할 수 있는 기술이 있거든요. 그런 특정한 부위만을 배양을 해서 우리가 원하는 물질만 이렇게 뽑아서 쓸 수가 있거든요. 그렇기 때문에 식물 복제를 이용한 기술은 상당히 앞으로도 많이 이용될 것이고 전망이 밝다고 그렇게 말씀드릴 수가 있겠습니다.
Cloning to replicate the exact bioactive and beneficial substances from plants without modification and manipulation in genes is a culmination of human resourcefulness making the most of nature's gifts.
Patients who visit hospitals are distressed 3 times. Firstly, of course, they're either sick or injured. Secondly, they often have to undergo a long and extensive registration process. And thirdly, they often face a long wait before receiving treatment. In order to tackle problems 2 and 3, hospitals are now using information and communications technologies to create new systems and processes. And with these systems now in place, a range of savings in terms of both time and money are being achieved.
Hospitals are getting innovative to better serve their patients, and they are turning to information and communications technology, or ICT, to come up with better solutions. And with the widespread use of smartphones, hospitals are utilizing apps to become more intelligent themselves. A general hospital at Changwon, Gyeongsangnam-do Province, a man enters the hospital. As he steps in through the entrance, his data pops up at the registration desk announcing his arrival. He only needs to go to the registration desk to announce his name to register. The tedious task of filling out a paper with personal information has been eliminated. So how is this possible? The system retrieves pre-filled information from the smartphone and sends it to the registration desk, which saves time. After registering, the patient doesn't have to wait in front of the doctor's office until he or she gets called. Patients can check their turn and waiting time through the smartphone, so they can go to the doctor's office when their turn comes.
대기하는 동안에 커피도 마실 수 있고 그리고 또 웨이팅이라든지 이런 걸 이용할 수도 있고 이런 점에서는 상당히 좋은 것 같습니다.
저희들은 지금 이제 우리 병원을 이용하는 환자분들을 위주로 우리 병원에 더 좀 쉽게 접근하고 쉽게 환자 정보를 인식할 수 있도록 개인 정보가 유출되지 않으면서 쉽게 인식할 수 있도록 그렇게 뭔가를 환자분들한테 다가갈 수 있는 방법이 없겠느냐 그런 취지에서 프로그램을 개발하게 된 겁니다.
The system isn't that complicated like other information and communications technology. It requires Bluetooth as its basic function, and patients and the hospital alike say that things have gotten better because of it.
BLE라고 하는 무선 블루투스 정보 기기를 가지고 저희 스마트폰하고 무선 통신을 하게 됩니다. 그럼 BLE에서 발사해주는 무선 신호를 잡아서 그 무선 신호를 스마트폰으로 수신을 해서 스마트폰이 하이한마음 서버에 직접 데이터를 전송하는 방식이기 때문에 개인 정보를 이용하지는 전혀 않습니다.
As for people who don't have a smartphone, such as kids, they can use a family member's because one smartphone can hold information for the whole family.
하나의 어플로 우리 가족 전체 인원들에 대해서 정보를 제공해 주니 편리한 것 같습니다.
Another general hospital in Seoul. It is a maze trying to find the doctor's office at a general hospital regardless of your age or gender. Everyone probably had gotten lost there trying to find the office or an examining room.
큰 병원에 오면은 길이 복잡해서 찾기도 힘들고 진료받기도 어렵습니다.
There is a smartphone app that can guide people around the hospital. By downloading the hospital navigation app, patients can find out where they are and where they are going for treatment and examination. Just like a car satellite navigation, it gives directions on a three-dimensional map, and when a patient gets lost on the way, it searches for an alternative route.
이 키오스크를 통해서 굉장히 편하게 쉽게 이렇게 찾아갈 수가 있고 그 위치 정보 서비스를 이용해서 자기가 가고 싶은 데를 쉽게 찾아갈 수 있어서 좀 편한 것 같습니다.
It is made possible through Bluetooth access points in the hospital, updating patients' whereabouts real time.
병원 곳곳에 설치되어 있는 블루투스 비콘에서 전파를 보내고 스마트폰에서 서버에 위치 정보를 보냄으로써 내가 어디에 있는지 위치 안내 서비스를 받게 될 수 있습니다.
People without a smartphone can access these services at kiosk machines installed throughout the hospital.
하루에 많이 길 안내 물어보시는데 키오스크 기계 들어오고 나서부터 거기서 직접 찾아가시는 길 안내가 있어가지고 더 편리해진 것 같아요.
However, this is just the beginning. There are more ICT services under development to assist hospital patients to make their visits pleasant.
환자 입장에서 보면 병원은 굉장히 복잡한 곳이죠. 절차도 복잡하고 가야 할 장소도 여러 군데이고 따라서 이와 같은 복잡한 병원 이용에 환자가 편안함을 느낄 수 있도록 병원에서 이제 진일보된 시스템 형식으로 해서 우리 병원 안에 진료를 받거나 또는 지원 부서를 찾을 장소를 누구나 쉽게 스마트폰을 들고 다니면서 이렇게 위치를 확인할 수 있는 시스템을 또 저희들이 개발을 하려고 지금 생각하고 있는 중입니다.
ICT systems developed in the medical industry so far had centered on assisting the medical team, but that is being changed to accommodate patients. It is at the initial stage, which means there are more to look forward to as hospitals get more intelligent.
It is not just dictatorship and economic woes that form such an incredible burden on the long-suffering North Korean people. The country has recently announced that later in the year it's likely to face catastrophic floods. And these floods have become almost an annual occurrence in the north. But the culprit is not simply weather. Another issue behind these problems is deforestation. So how seriously impacted have North Korea's forests been, and how has the country come to such a dire pass?
North Korea is losing greenery fast, with forests in a scale of 130,000 soccer fields turning into wasteland every year. Deforestation causes serious environmental dangers, leading to natural disasters like floods and climate change, and worsens economic conditions due to degradation of forestry resources. North Korea earlier alerted the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies that it was expecting serious floods this summer. Francis Marcus, IFRC spokesman for East Asia, said North Korea authorities have forecast significant flooding and foreign organizations were readying relief activities to help North Korea. North Korea sponsored a pre-disaster meeting in Pyongyang in July, sharing the information of weather disaster and preparedness with foreign aid groups. It is unusual for the heavily secretive Pyongyang regime to seek out foreign aid before it was offered help first. It shows how nervous and vulnerable North Korea is against heavy floods and climate-related disasters. Flooding, damage, and inundation has become almost an annual rite in North Korea. Over the last 3 decades, more than 1,700 people died from floods and typhoons. Losses are estimated at $23 billion.
1980년대 이후부터 산림 산지 개발 또 농토 확보 이것 때문에 이제 사실 이제 산림이 많이 이제 황폐해지기 시작을 했거든요. 그래서 90년대 이후 특히 이 산을 깎아서 이제 그 계단밭이죠. 이걸 만들면서 산이 이제 산림이 많이 황폐화되어졌고 또 하나 이제 북한 주민들이 아직 한 300만 명 이상의 주민들이 주로 그 땔감용 나무로서 취사를 해결하기 때문에 그래서 매년 이제 벌목되는 나무가 상당하죠.
Deforestation and vicious cycle has been worsening North Korea's environment, economy, and resources. North Korea cut down more trees and turned forests into farmland due to shortage of food. Because soils easily erode without tree roots, floods and sedimentation of farmlands have worsened. Food demand, drought, and other natural disasters again sent people to cut down the woods.
식량이 부족하다 보니까 농지를 확보하기 위해서 이런 그 대규모 자연 훼손을 하기 시작합니다. 그런 경작을 하다 보니까 토사가 많이 쓸려 내려오고 또 이런 것들이 바로 이제 또 강이나 호수를 메우게 되고 이게 조금만 비가 와도 이제 물이 넘치는 이런 이제 형태로 변한 거죠.
Mountains had taken up 68% of North Korea's land in the 1990s, have been reduced to 47% due to reckless deforestation. 1/3 of North Korea's forests were lost in just 2 decades. Forests gone barren cannot perform their primary natural function of sucking in carbon emissions out of the atmosphere. In the 2000s, forests instead became the pollutants of greenhouse gases.
모든 그 시스템 자체가 탄소를 많이 배출하는 구조로 되어 있습니다. 에너지가 부족해가지고 주로 쓰는 게 불체를 해가지고 나무를 뗀다든지 또 석탄을 또 뗀다든지 이런 것들이 이제 산소를 많이 배출하는 것이고요. 그 대신 산림이 이제 흡수를 해야 되는데 이 산림이 밀도가 낮다 보니까 이게 산에 나무가 있어도 듬성듬성하다든지 그 밀도가 낮다 보니까 이 흡수하는 능력이 많이 떨어지죠.
Despite the dire ecological ruin and its potential threat to livelihood, North Korea has no immediate plans to fix it.
From the perspective of the international society, North Korea has the weakest infrastructure to deal with natural disasters. According to the German Watch Report 2012, North Korea has scored the 10th worst climate change risk index globally and recorded the highest rate of damage to national GDP due to natural disasters.
Dangers from North Korea's forest and tree-less conditions are not just threatening to North Korea. They can cause ill effects to the entire ecosystem of the Korean peninsula.
At present, the wasteland measures approximately 3 million hectares or less. Scary thing is, this is still an ongoing process. As a result of these issues, the Korean peninsula is an environmental time bomb with biodiversity reduction due to wildlife habitat destruction and progression of desertification and severance of the northern and southern ecosystem lying on its head.
Barren landscape in North Korea stretches to 3 million hectares, tantamount to about 50 times the size of Seoul. It would likely cost astronomical time and money to restore and refill these forests again.
To reforest this deforested 3 million hectares of area would take more than 50 years of reforestation at 60,000 hectares per year, or area which is equivalent to the size of a Seoul metropolitan city, and create astronomical operational costs in order to do so. In addition, if the condition of North Korea's forest soil requires pre-erosion control and erosion control operations, then the already astronomical operational cost may increase tenfold.
During her visit to Dresden, Germany in March, South Korean President Park Geun-hye included reforestation aid in proposing humanitarian exchanges and cooperative ventures to North Korea.
농업 생산의 부진과 산림의 황폐화로 고통받는 북한 지역에 농업, 축산, 그리고 산림을 함께 개발하는 복합 농촌 단지를 조성하기 위해 남북한이 힘을 합해야 합니다.
North Korea is muddling along on international charity due to frequent flooding and natural disasters. Its increasingly barren landscape is worsening famine and threatening livelihood of all living creatures in the country. Yet North Korea remains obsolete to environmental dangers and snubs any offer of help from the South.
남북한 사이에 이제 그 북한의 그 산림 환경 문제를 해결하기 위해서는 우선 북한 정부의 태도가 바뀌어야 되는데요. 조립 문제는 조립 문제로 끝나는 게 아니고 주민들의 생활과 바로 직결되는 문제입니다. 그래서 모든 정책의 초점을 주민들이 보다 이제 행복하고 또 안전한 생활을 할 수 있도록 거기에 초점을 맞춰서 태도 변화를 좀 했으면 하는 그런 기대를 가지고 있습니다.
North Korea has made an irreversible wreck on its natural resources with its reckless deforestation and urbanization campaign. As a result, it is fighting with natural disasters every year. It must immediately embark on fundamental and long-term reforestation program to restore its landscape instead of running to foreign aid groups with flood warnings.
And that's all we have time for on Bizline this week. But do join us again next week. We'll be looking at consumer products, which of course is all about branding, right? Well, not necessarily. Korea is now home to a surging sector of OEM, original equipment manufacturing, and ODM, original development manufacturing companies. Why are they doing so well right now? We'll find out next time. But that's all for now. Thanks for joining us. I'm Andrew Salmon. This was Bizline. See you next week. Goodbye.